United Arab Emirates says it has intercepted a number of missile strikes from Iran.
Iran has continued to deliberately attack its neighbors. Just yesterday, Iran attacked Oman.
Authorities in Dubai say a drone incident near the international airport has damaged a fuel tank on site.
Dubai was supposed to have its best year ever. Doha was riding a post-World Cup momentum wave. Riyadh's Vision 2030 tourism transformation was finally delivering real numbers. International arrivals up, luxury hotels fully booked, airlines expanding routes. The entire Gulf had reinvented itself as the world's premier travel and transit hub. And then February 28th happened. In 48 hours, everything those countries spent a decade building collapsed. According to the World Travel and Tourism Council, the Gulf region is losing $600 million in visitor spending every single day the conflict continues. $600 million per day, not per week, per day. Between February 28th and March 8th alone, airspace closures and airline suspensions disrupted a combined 37,000 scheduled routes touching the Gulf. 37,000 flights in 10 days. Flight Radar 24 confirmed 21,300 flights canceled at 7 major airports, including Dubai, Doha, and Abu Dhabi since the strikes started. Dubai International, the world's busiest international airport, closed. The airport that handles more international passengers than any other on Earth. Dark. And the Qatar-funded Middle East Council on Global Affairs is now describing the war as having irreversibly shaken the region's image, exposing a deep-seated fragility beneath the facade of the Gulf's rapid economic transformation. Irreversibly, not temporarily, not until the ceasefire. Irreversibly. Before we reveal exactly how Dubai's hotel occupancy crashed from 80% to 30% in 48 hours, and what luxury hotels are doing in desperation to survive, why Oxford Economics calculated a $56 billion loss in visitor spending in 2026 alone, and why the damage extends years beyond the conflict itself, what happened to the 1 million passengers stranded across the globe when more than 20,000 flights were canceled in days and the US government sent military planes to evacuate its own citizens, why Bahrain's hotel occupancy fell into single digits, the lowest recorded in the modern history of Gulf tourism, while Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar Airways simultaneously suspended all operations, losing billions, how the airspace closure forces Qantas, Lufthansa, British Airways, and Air India to reroute around the entire Middle East, adding 4 hours and thousands of dollars in fuel costs to every single flight between Europe and Asia, and why the Qatar-funded Middle East Council on Global Affairs said this war has ended the narrative of the Gulf as a permanently safe destination for tourists, expatriates, and investors. Subscribe right now and hit that bell. Because what the Iran war did to the Middle East tourism industry in 48 hours is not a crisis. It is the destruction of a decade of economic diversification, $56 billion in losses, 38 million missing visitors, and an image problem that does not end when the shooting stops. We connect it right now. Here's what happened to Dubai in 48 hours, and why the numbers are unlike anything the Gulf has ever recorded. Dubai has one of the most resilient tourism economies on Earth. It survived the 2008 financial crisis. It survived COVID-19. It survived the 2019 Aramco attacks. It survived every regional crisis of the past 2 decades by positioning itself as the one corner of the Middle East that transcends geopolitics. Safe, neutral, above the chaos. That brand took 30 years to build. It took 48 hours to destroy. Major hotels in Dubai, which routinely operate at 80% occupancy during peak and shoulder seasons, are now reporting occupancy levels of a mere 30%, a catastrophic 50-point drop that has forced luxury operators into emergency measures including slashing room rates, launching desperate promotional campaigns, and pivoting aggressively toward domestic visitors. 50 points in 48 hours. 5-star hotels that were turning away bookings in January are now running flash sales. Properties that charged $800 per night in February are offering 20 to 40% discounts just to keep the lights on. The U.S. State Department issued a Level 3 Reconsider Travel Advisory for the UAE on March 2, 2026, activating clauses in millions of standard travel insurance policies, with insurers including Allianz Travel, AXA, and Berkshire Hathaway Travel Protection, confirming they are processing Gulf-related cancellation claims at volume. Every insurance claim processed is a booking that will not be rebooked. Every traveler who receives a payout is a traveler who is now planning their next holiday somewhere that is not the Middle East. And travelers who purchased policies after the conflict began discovered that most new policies now explicitly exclude Gulf region geopolitical events as a known risk. The insurance market just priced the Middle East out of the tourism market in real time. World-famous shopping malls and high-end restaurants are experiencing drastic footfall reductions. The hospitality sector has initiated workforce contractions with layoffs and reduced working hours affecting thousands of service industry employees. The UAE government is actively deploying stimulus packages to prevent localized business collapses, though these are viewed as short-term life support rather than a structural fix. Stimulus packages. For an emirate that was supposed to be a global financial powerhouse beyond the reach of regional conflict. Short-term life support. For a tourism economy that entered 2026 expecting another record year and instead watched its occupancy rate collapse to levels not seen since the worst days of the pandemic. Here is what happened to Bahrain and why single-digit hotel occupancy is a number that has never appeared in Gulf tourism data before. Dubai's crisis is bad. Bahrain's is worse. While Dubai is experiencing the largest absolute financial loss due to its size, Bahrain is arguably suffering the most acute proportional impact, with some hotel occupancy rates falling into the single digits. Single digits, 3% occupancy, 5% occupancy. Numbers that mean hotels are essentially empty. Staff reporting to work to serve almost no guests. Fixed costs running at full speed against revenue approaching zero. Iran struck a military base in Bahrain and targeted the country's energy installations directly, forcing Bahrain's state-run oil company Bapco to declare force majeure after waves of Iranian strikes damaged its refineries and halted production. Force majeure. Energy infrastructure damaged. Military base struck. For a country of 1.5 million people with a land area smaller than London, this is not a crisis with distant ripples. It is a direct hit on everything the economy depends on simultaneously. The 2026 Bahrain Grand Prix Formula One race was canceled, along with the Saudi Grand Prix, as major sporting events across the Middle East were scrapped or rescheduled due to the war. The Formula One races, gone. The events that bring tens of thousands of high-spending international visitors, fill every hotel room, and generate hundreds of millions in economic activity, canceled. The 2026 Dubai World Cup night, while still scheduled, saw major participants cancel, citing ongoing tensions and air travel disruption. The sporting calendar that Gulf states spent billions building as proof of their global status, gutted by a war they did not start and cannot control. Now here is what the airspace closure did to the entire world, and why 1 million stranded passengers is not a Middle East problem, but a planetary one. More than 20,000 flights have been canceled globally since the strike started, stranding more than 1 million passengers around the world according to aviation data firm Cirium. 1 million, not in the Middle East, around the world. Because the Middle East is not just a tourism destination, it is the planet's aviation crossroads. Within an 8-hour flying distance from the Middle East lives 2/3 of the world's population. And when that corridor is blocked, it forces aviation to either move far north into Russian or Pakistani airspace, or fly south, adding thousands of miles to every route, according to international aviation and tourism consultant Anita Menderata. 2/3 of the world's population, within one corridor, now closed. The Middle East accounts for approximately 14% of global international transit traffic, with regional aviation hubs in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Doha, and Bahrain, typically processing around 526,000 passengers per day. 526,000 passengers per day, through 4 airports, now largely closed. Bahrain, Iraq, Israel, Kuwait, Qatar, Syria, and the UAE all closed their respective airspace following the attacks, with international airlines including Air India, Biman Bangladesh Airlines, British Airways, Cathay Pacific, Indigo, Lufthansa, Virgin Atlantic, and Wizz Air all suspending services to the Middle East, not one airline. 8 major international carriers, simultaneously. Australian carrier Qantas told CNBC its flight from Perth to London now requires rerouting through Singapore, adding hours to the journey while allowing it to pick up additional passengers at the refueling stop. Every Qantas long-haul flight, rerouted, more fuel, more time, higher ticket prices, on routes that never touch the Middle East at all. For U.S. carriers, the Gulf disruption adds 2 to 4 hours to flights between Europe and Southeast Asia and South Asia that previously transited Gulf airspace, and Delta Air's own annual filing confirmed that every 1 cent increase in jet fuel per gallon adds $40 million to its yearly fuel bill, meaning a 10% fuel increase adds $1 billion to Delta's 2026 costs alone. $1 billion to Delta alone. From rerouting that has nothing to do with Delta's Middle East routes. Purely from the knock-on cost of longer flights and more expensive jet fuel caused by a war in a region Delta does not even fly to directly. Here is what Oxford Economics calculated, and why $56 billion in losses is the number that haunts every Gulf finance minister. Oxford Economics estimated inbound arrivals to the Middle East could decline 11 to 27% year-on-year in 2026 due to the conflict, compared to a December forecast that had projected 13% growth, with losses of 23 to 38 million fewer international visitors and $34 billion to $56 billion in lost visitor spending, $34 to $56 billion in 1 year. For context, the entire GDP of Bahrain is approximately $45 billion. The region is losing the equivalent of an entire country's annual economic output in visitor spending alone, in a single conflict year. The World Travel and Tourism Council's 2026 pre-conflict forecast for the Middle East had projected $178 billion in international visitor spending across the region, a number that is now being slashed in real time as bookings evaporate, tours are canceled, and airlines pull capacity from routes that no longer make commercial sense. $178 billion projected, now $30 to $56 billion missing from that total. And Oxford Economics explicitly noted the damage includes expected lingering sentiment impacts beyond the immediate conflict period. Beyond the conflict, the losses do not stop when the shooting stops. In March 2026, Qatar and UAE joined Saudi Arabia, Oman, Turkey, Israel, Jordan, Bahrain, and more countries across the Middle East in experiencing a 60% decline in tourism, with Qatar Airways alone reporting a staggering 60% decline in international passenger traffic on key routes passing through the Gulf. 60% across every major Gulf carrier and every major Gulf destination simultaneously. Emirates, Etihad, Qatar Airways, all three of the world's most ambitious airlines, the carriers that built their entire business model on connecting the world through the Gulf, grounded or operating at minimal fraction of normal capacity. Here is what this means for Vision 2030, and why Saudi Arabia's decade-long economic diversification just took a direct hit. Saudi Arabia's entire post-oil economic strategy rests on one premise, that international tourists, expatriates, and investors will choose to come to the kingdom in numbers large enough to replace oil revenue as the primary driver of GDP growth. Riyadh joined the list of affected destinations with tourism down 60% as international travelers abandoned the region entirely, while analysts warned the war could undermine years of investment aimed at diversifying Gulf economies away from oil dependence. Undermine years of investment, not set back by months. Undermine years. The infrastructure is still there. The hotels are still built. The airports are still constructed. But the perception, the foundational assumption that the Gulf is permanently safe, that is the casualty that cannot be rebuilt by construction spending or government stimulus packages. The Qatar-funded Middle East Council on Global Affairs stated the war has irreversibly shaken the region's image, exposing a deep-seated fragility beneath the facade of the Gulf's rapid economic transformation. While Deutsche Welle reported that Gulf states are unlikely to sustain high levels of investment spending during or after the war. Irreversibly shaken. Fragility beneath the facade. The narrative that the Gulf sold to the world, that it had transcended its neighborhood, that its wealth and modernity placed it beyond the reach of regional conflict, is the narrative that just died. A United Nations Development Program study released on March 30th estimated the war could reduce economic growth in Arab nations by $120 to $194 billion in GDP. $120 to $194 billion in GDP across the Arab world. Not just tourism, not just hotels. The entire economic trajectory of the region, permanently altered by a war that was supposed to stay contained to Iran and Israel, and instead reached into every hotel lobby, every airline terminal, and every investor spreadsheet across the Gulf. One thing is absolutely certain. The World Travel and Tourism Council confirmed the Gulf is losing $600 million in visitor spending every single day the conflict continues. 37,000 flights were disrupted between February 28th and March 8th alone. Over 20,000 flights canceled globally, stranding more than 1 million passengers worldwide. Dubai hotel occupancy collapsed from 80% to 30% in 48 hours. Bahrain hotel occupancy fell into single digits, the lowest recorded figure in modern Gulf tourism history. Qatar Airways reported a 60% decline in international passenger traffic. Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar Airways all suspended operations simultaneously. 8 major international airlines, including British Airways, Lufthansa, Air India, and Cathay Pacific, suspended Middle East services. Oxford Economics calculated $34 to $56 billion in lost visitor spending for 2026 alone, with 23 to 38 million fewer international arrivals. The UNDP estimated $120 to $194 billion in GDP losses across Arab nations. The 2026 Bahrain Grand Prix and Saudi Grand Prix were both canceled, and the Qatar-funded Middle East Council on Global Affairs said the war has irreversibly shaken the region's image. So here is what happens next. Gulf states spent a decade and trillions of dollars building the argument that they had outgrown their geography, that Dubai was a global city, that Doha was a world capital, that Riyadh was a destination worth choosing over Paris or Singapore. That argument required one thing to be true: that the Gulf was permanently safe. It took one war, 48 hours, and 37,000 canceled flights to prove it was not. The hotels are still there, the runways still exist, the infrastructure survived, but the traveler who rerouted to Southern Europe, Southeast Asia, or the Caribbean for their March 2026 holiday discovered those destinations were not just adequate substitutes, they were excellent ones. And the business traveler who was stranded in Doha for 4 days without a flight home is now routing every future trip through Istanbul or Singapore instead. $600 million per day is the price the Middle East pays for a war it did not fully choose. And the meter is still running. Stay tuned.